And Biden and President-elect Trump will meet at the White House tomorrow to discuss the transition of power. This is considered a political tradition, but it did not happen in 2020 when Trump disputed his loss to Biden.
And before Trump's White House visit, he will meet with House Republicans, including some from Georgia. Let's bring in Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon, who's in downtown Atlanta ahead of that meeting. Doug?
Right, this will happen before Trump goes to the White House to renew that long-standing tradition of meeting with the outgoing commander-in-chief. He's going to be talking to House Republicans, and there will be some Georgia names in that room. One of them is Congressman Rich McCormick. We talked to him today. He represents Georgia's 6th district. He said he wants to hear Trump's boldest proposals and how he plans to carry them out on things like immigration, the economy. He is a former Marine, a retired Marine, I should say, so national security as well. But he told me he also wants to hear how Trump plans to cut the national debt. It currently sits at $35 trillion, and McCormick said he's a bit of a debt hawk, so he plans to pick the president's brain about that. We're in downtown Atlanta. Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.